Welcome to the Frontline podcast, brought to you in association with the Atla Group.
Andy, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
No problem, Martin.
So perhaps for our listeners, provide a little bit of context just to your background and how you got to where you are today in regard to your career.
Yeah, sure. I guess my career probably started in the manner that most tax advisors' careers start, and that it kind of just happened. You end up sort of, I guess, washed up on the beach of being a tax advisor. And I was fortunate enough, really, to get on the graduate scheme for Ernst & Young way back in the 90s, and really, really enjoyed it, the firm, to be honest. But like many of them, sort of progressed through other members of the Big Four. Joined Grant Thornton after that, but back in, I think, about 2011 or so, give or take, I set up my own tax advisory practice, hoping that some of that sort of magic dust from the entrepreneurs that I dealt with had kind of rubbed off on me. I think the jury's still out on that, to be honest. But that was the plan at the time.
And the delve down the tax, does that fascinate you? What there must obviously be a passion around that. Is that what's the drive there? I'm
not sure whether I would honestly describe it as a passion. I know we're supposed to describe what we do as passions these days, but I think intellectually, I've always found the work interesting. I think as time goes by, perhaps a smaller and smaller percentage of the work has that same pull, because you've been there and done it before. But I think for me, it's really been the clients and the commercial issues, and then obviously wrapping the tax advice around them. Because I've always really come from the point of view, and I think it's always actually been the reality that tax it's not the most important thing in the world. Obviously, just between you and me, nobody's listening or watching this, but it isn't the most important thing in the world. Commercial, personal objectives should always take the front seat. Clearly, if you're embarking on some kind of investment or project where, on one hand it's taxed at 0% and the other it's taxed at 100%, then tax does become quite important. But you really should be led by the commercial and personal objectives first and foremost.
I want just to go back to the point about that sprinkle of dust in dealing with entrepreneurs through your career. Is there something we like to kind of dig in here? Is that, have you seen trends with entrepreneurs? What do you see? Perhaps common patterns. I guess you might meet new clients and instinctively know, irrespective of their business, whether they've got that, let's call it that entrepreneur spirit. What do you see, and maybe what have you taken away from that yourself in your own businesses?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's dangerous, I think, to generalise on the personalities of individuals. But I think commonly, I think there is an element of certainly when it comes to tax. Anyway, maybe it says more about tax than it is about entrepreneurs. But around having a pretty short attention span. When it comes to dealing with tax and financial affairs. And I found that actually has been quite liberating when it comes to advising clients, that if somebody, the first meeting you have with them, they give you a very clear warning. It says, my attention span's 20 minutes. You need to be able to tell me what I need to do in 20 minutes. It's quite liberating, actually, and it enables you, because I've always been a great believer in, you need to give clients advice, not simply lists of pros and cons, and make your own mind up. There needs to be clearly you brief clients on the risk and various permutations, but at the end of the day, our job is to advise people on what to do, and actually making sure that sort of message is loud and clear for somebody with a short attention span is quite a challenge, and I think that's kind of what I really enjoy about working with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and so to go back to the comment around the advice and perhaps setting up your own firm, that ability to be able to, let's say, advise clients rather than just giving them a pro-con.
Yeah.
And that's part of that drive, I assume.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, you can, rather than having, I guess, a firm, wide sort of blueprint and sometimes more than a blueprint, sometimes a straitjacket, I guess, and how you deliver that advice, being able to tailor it for a client who, say, is 10,000 feet up in the sort of atmosphere and wants just to know what to do, as against a client who may be incredibly analytical and wants to look through the stuff themselves. I was with somebody last week who made it very clear at the outset they like reading tax judgments and the legislation and things themselves. So for somebody like that, you approach it differently. They're interested in the detail. Whereas for my entrepreneurial client, clearly you still do all the work, but the question is whether a lot of that research just simply sits on the file, hopefully gathering dust, and you were giving them a very sort of clear summary, or you may just put the summary on top of the main advice and you say, look, actually in paragraph 3 of the summary, I've told you what you need to do. If you want to read the rest, it's there. And it's about horses for courses, I guess.
Yeah, managing. What you expect the client to need. So although you may not like to put your own hat on and call yourself an entrepreneur, I don't know, but you've obviously set up a couple of businesses. In those challenges for you in your own capacity, what have you seen as those, if any, or has it been all plain sailing?
Yeah. I don't see myself as an entrepreneur at all. I've owned businesses, all, I guess, related to what the professional sort of career that I've had. I see an entrepreneur as somebody who, my definition perhaps is no better than anybody else, but somebody who can pretty much turn their hat to anything, and they will chop and change very, very different industries and very, very different perhaps products and services. And it's just the ability to be able to identify very clearly, quickly, and how to monetize something that makes you become an entrepreneur. Whereas I think somebody who has a career in tax, who then sets up a tax business and maybe then a slightly different tax business, I wouldn't call myself an entrepreneur at all. And in many ways, there are lots of aspects of running a business I really don't like at all, to be honest. And I think for me, a lot of those came particularly to the fore during COVID. But for example, my own sort of personal, the areas I don't really like to get involved in too much is a lot around. It has to be said around sort of staff management, personnel management. I'm going to say this because I don't have any staff at the moment, but it's not what I relish. I enjoy, the client work, the technical aspects, the business development. But in terms of managing staff, but it's never been my forte. And there's a great elements of so a great part of probably what drove me away, I think, from the career working in large organizations was that actually that sort of person management, people management became a bigger sort of area of my work, and I kind of ran away from that, built a business, and suddenly 10 years later realized, have I just built myself the same prison here? And hence I've decided to go on and do some other things. But yeah, for me, it really is about that core. It's the clients, the technical aspect, the BD elements that I think I relish. Yeah.
So, I mean, I will disagree on the entrepreneur bit, but we can agree to disagree on that side of it. And part of that reason is we look at, and I don't think we've spoken since the change in the world really around the development of crypto. And from an outsider, certainly on social, there's a pivot there of, certainly from my observations, one of the leading talkers in that space. So to me, that is a pivot. It might still be intact, but it's a complete pivot. So what took you down that path initially?
Again, perhaps quite boring reason. So many people probably looked at crypto and thought, God, this is sort of, a world-changing technology, and that kind of got them into the space. For me, it was, as I say, slightly more mundane in the sense that I came across this asset, and really it was a bit of an intellectual sort of folly, really, when I looked at what was a brand new asset. And how often can incidentally, how often can you say, oh, there's a new asset? It doesn't happen, does it? But I looked at a new asset and thought, oh, how is that treated from a legal perspective? Nobody really knows. And in fact, it's remarkable that probably only in the last few years that the international courts are coming to the conclusion that crypto is personal property. Now that's almost loopy that in this day and age there's an asset there, and the courts are only just deciding that it's actually property. I think that's kind of amazing. But then also going back to sort of 2016, 2017, which is kind of the period that I'm talking about here, it was how on earth are those assets taxed? And clearly you need to, the legal status always will do a lot of heavy lifting on that, and it's difficult to say how something's taxed if you don't know what the legal status is. But that's really where my interest in it was peaked. If only I'd started investing at the same time.
Wouldn't be here now.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be sat behind this microphone. Yeah. It took me a few years, and I've done okay, I guess. Guess out of it. But that I started writing about crypto probably back then.
Was there much framework back then? We're talking, I suppose, 8 years ago now. Around had that legal status been set by then or not? And what was the tax framework like that back then?
Absolutely not. So to give HMRC their due, and I don't often give them any dues at all, as we said, but way back in 2014, they had listed probably some guidance on how. And back then it was Bitcoin. So if you think back to 2014, crypto assets were Bitcoin. Ethereum might have been just about kicking around. I'm not sure, but the crypto market was very, very different. And you didn't have, millions of coins. You had perhaps Bitcoin and one or two others, perhaps. So the guidance was on Bitcoin, and it seemed to have been driven by perhaps the VAT side of things, but. That was the start of guidance coming from HMRC, and looking back with hindsight, it's incredibly, incredibly flawed, that guidance. And if you were to rely on that now, which you wouldn't, because if they published further guidance, then you'd find yourself in serious trouble, because you would probably be thinking, oh, it's probably essentially speculative gain there, but it's free of tax, which HMRC had suggested it might be. Or alternatively, you'd be treating it as an FX gain, which clearly is wrong as well. But they have obviously superseded that with other guidance. And I think actually, even to this day still, that HMRC's, the thoroughness of what they have released is there's nothing like it, I don't think, elsewhere in the world. Now, I don't agree with everything that is in there, but that's kind of by the by. And actually, they've taken the trouble to try and understand the technology and the various transactions, and they've set out quite comprehensive guidance, and you won't really see anything like that elsewhere in the world, I don't think.
Right, interesting. So the modern day, looking at today, what are those biggest challenges around clients that hold crypto and might have tax liabilities? Is it? Yeah. Yeah. Where do you start?
So when I first started getting involved in crypto, so back then, most of the clients who came to me, but let's face it, they'd invested in Bitcoin and some of those early coins, not from. It's difficult to kind of put yourself back in their shoes, and they hadn't done it to make a load of money. They'd done it because, they were in it for the technology, or they were in it for the sort of more the libertarian, anarchic elements. And a number of years later, many of those people came out of, I always like to think it's terribly disparaging now, but they came blinking out of their basements one day and thought, we've got, we sat on, substantial gains here. What do we need to do with them? So a lot of those early clients that came through the door, it was all about regularizing their affairs. I think if you fast forward to today's date, things have become much, much more sophisticated than that. So, well, some of the work I get involved in now is around sort of play-to-earn gaming, blockchain gaming, and helping them set up that type of business. And there's one business that I'm working with at the moment who actually one of their key things was that they're going to have people playing this game around the world. And a play-to-earn game, Matt, you're probably aware, but for anybody who's listening, play-to-earn game is if parents out there have got kids who play Roblox, for instance, which is kind of an online world, then they're probably being bugged at birthdays and Christmas to get these gift cards which give them in-game currency called Robux. So you give them the £10, they turn it into Robux, and they can spend that in the game, and that's it. It's a one-way street. Whereas with a play-to-earn game on the blockchain, you convert your £10 into a native token. You essentially can use that in the game. You can maybe make some extra currency by being in sort of games, battles and games and selling services and on digital goods. But you can then pull that off as well. So it becomes a two-way street. But what one particular operator of the game wanted to make clear to all of its users was that actually what you make is potentially taxable in the country that you're operating. So they were keen to, nothing bigger probably than a buzzkill while you're playing a game than big data with pay your taxes. Yeah. But they wanted to do that and have some education in there. So I thought that was quite nice and very, very different to what many people's view of crypto may be, that still has a number of associations with nefarious activity, bad actors. And where was it? I've forgotten what the question was now. But yeah, so that's how it's
modern challenges.
Yeah, that's how it's become more sophisticated. The challenges will always be that even when I talked about the HMRC guidance, it still is very, very much deals with the basics. So it'll be buying and selling fungible tokens, so things like Bitcoin particularly. It will deal with staking as if it's one kind of sort of homogenous blob, really, when actually a lot of the income producing activities in crypto, they don't necessarily fall fairly and squarely down one particular funnel. There's still a real requirement, in my view, for people who take part in these transactions to really understand the substance of a transaction, and I don't necessarily think the guidance leads anybody down that route. I think if you're looking at significant transactions, they're slightly unusual. I still think it's really worth getting tax advice and somebody who obviously understands the space, because I think there's still a lot of vagaries there.
Yeah, so the example I guess then is staking, farming, those types of things aren't defined within tax legislation. Therefore, you're trying to put it in an income hole or a capital hole or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big problems with crypto is the inconsistency of terminology. And staking is a great example. Staking means at least three things in crypto. Which of those three versions of staking may you be involved in? Well, you need to understand it, and then you need to check actually whether that is covered in HMRC's guidance, or you need to get some proper advice. And I think that is really the biggest barrier to for professional advisors. It's not really the tax sort of framework which is the problem. It is more the concepts, the terminology, what is going on in a particular transaction, which is the problem. And even a tax advisor, let's say, who isn't a property investor or a property developer themselves, they kind of will understand the terminology around property investment and property development, or if they don't, can find out pretty quickly. You can't really say the same for crypto. You need to have a really good understanding of the transactions. Once you understand what's gone on, then the UK tax system deals with it pretty well. It creaks a little bit around the edges, but probably just picking the number out of thin air, 75-80% of the transactions, you can sort of plug into the right bit of the tax code relatively straightforward there, in my view.
So I assume there's a dynamic outside of the different elements to deal with, from staking department to just gains or not gains. Then when you're dealing with cross-border clients, I assume then there's the dynamic of, well, that's how HMRC see it, but you might have footprints in other locations that then you have to factor cross-border tax elements in from a...
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's always the challenge of anybody, any advisor in this space, somebody who has got cross-border issues of any kind, is dealing with the tax position in perhaps another jurisdiction.
And how sophisticated are the rest of the world? You say HMRC has been reasonably, well, you said you're paying compliments to them. What are other locations like?
Yeah, and that may reflect a slightly different agenda. So the US, for instance, certainly, to the best of my knowledge, has not produced anything near the same kind of guidance as HMRC. But is that because of a slightly different approach? Because if you look at the different, I guess, certainly published approach to the two, the UK government seems to view crypto as a potential opportunity for growth. Give or take a few comments by, I think there's a Treasury Select Committee, but generally speaking, I think most of the government sees crypto as something that the UK should be good at and positive and be all warm and fuzzy about it. And maybe that is what is encouraging HMRC to set out the tax position. I think the US approach seems to be almost completely at the opposite end of the spectrum, that certainly the SEC seems hell-bent on driving most crypto business out of the UK. For instance, I think even Coinbase, I think they were last man standing from that perspective. I think even they're considering their options. So it may well be that the lack of guidance perhaps reflects that sort of wider approach. But I'm speculating there. And
I presume there's countries in the world that just aren't even looking at it when it comes from a tax perspective.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there are lots of places, I guess, that don't. First of all, perhaps don't tax personal sort of capital gains and income. Like the UAE, what's the point of them going to town on?
True.
On something like that? But I think, I just think most other jurisdictions seem pretty slow when it comes to setting out what their approach will be. And I guess they have their own reasons for that. And again, the danger is that as somebody who is particularly interested in crypto and is from the UK and sees what HMRC are doing, you then look at, I don't know, we're talking beforehand about South Africa. You look at the South African position. It's just not got to the same point. And the same be said for most of the Jews. I can't really think of any other authorities which have that I'm aware of, that have set out their thinking in quite so black and white terms as HMRC. And that's something they should be commended for.
Kudos to the HMRC.
Yeah, as I say, just this once.
Yeah. So in regard to cryptocurrency, where do you see that ultimately in regard to replacing fiat, not replacing fiat, working alongside it, maybe from a philosophical point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think central bank digital coins, it's really only a matter of time by the looks of it. I think everybody is certainly in government, seem very, very excited about the the concepts. As to what a CBDC will look like, I think it's interesting and does raise some philosophical questions, and it's interesting because obviously people might not be aware, but if you create a central bank cryptocurrency, that does allow, I guess, the currency to be programmable, if that is what particular governments want. And once you go down that particular rabbit hole, it's very easy to start moving into sort of territories that may make you sort of look like a sort of a conspiracy theorist or a tinfoil hat wearer. Whereas you think, actually, you take it to one extreme and think, if restrictions could be programmed into a currency, and you look back to the pandemic, for instance, what might a government have programmed into that you couldn't spend the currency outside a particular geographic area, or you couldn't spend it during certain times, or maybe during your a couple of hours walk, state-sanctioned walk that you're allowed, or something. So it does raise some interesting questions from that point of view. And I don't necessarily think it's particularly something which will naturally depend on the flavour of the government, whether it's left or right wing. But you see things like if you can restrict somebody gets benefits or whatever, you're paying benefits in your CBDC. You can't spend it on booze, you can't spend it on fags. You can only go and spend it down at the supermarket. So there is quite an opportunity for a government to sort of
control.
Control. Not being able to take it out, spend it outside of the UK, things like that. It will make, I guess, sort of exchange controls and things like that quite easy. So it is. I don't necessarily think governments will automatically go down that route. It does feel a little bit like a government's wet dream, being able to assert so much control over what people can spend their money on. So maybe I am becoming a conspiracy theorist in my old age. I don't know. Yeah.
Satoshi will be turning in his grave, I suspect.
Absolutely, that would be a real sort of irony of it all.
Yeah, wouldn't it just?
That it was to take control out of the hands of in the initial days, out of the banks, wasn't it? And taking power from intermediaries, and then you find actually it's just control is wrestled by a government. It would be very ironic, I think.
Yeah, indeed. So maybe switching subjects away from crypto for a few moments. Obviously, very much background in, it's called traditional tax, although all is traditional, but there's been non-dom changes recently, perhaps without going into the detail of that. But what are you talking to clients about? Obviously, a certain action plan, but there's obviously an element of unknown coming as well. But what's the conversations you're having there at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think certainly over the last couple of years, and the sample size of people I deal with, I appreciate it's small. Don't represent a big organisation or anything like that, but there's certainly been a noticeable flow of people, I think, leaving the UK over recent years. I think there are some surveys that support that. I think they were, if I'm thinking about it, they were by sort of, I guess, global mobility, sort of get your residence here type organisation. So they would have some self-interest in that. But assuming the figures are right, I think it shows that actually there are quite a lot of people leaving the UK, and you see various hotspots that people are moving to, and it is really, I guess, tracking wealthy sort of millionaires and above that kind of data. I think since the announcements, kind of surprise announcements, I guess, back in the spring budget, again, it just seems to have led to more conversations around, is the UK the right place for us? And I think that obviously will become more and more focused in people's mind, particularly if they do, as Labour are proposing, somehow trying to make the situation worse by removing the IHT benefits on essentially excluded property trusts. I think that will cause some significant rethinking if that is introduced. Now, clearly, it's subject to the election, but the election does feel a bit like a dead rubber at the moment. So we'll see how that goes. But I do feel that it's very easy at the moment for resident non-doms to simply become, non-residents, control business from overseas, maybe spend, a couple of months during the summer in London. I think the government is overestimating how difficult it is to do these things. So I do unfortunately see more people leaving the UK. There was a survey actually. It's quite a small sample size. I think it was done by the LSE, the School of Economics, and it was only about 30, 40 people. And the takeaway point from that seemed to be that people didn't really want to leave the UK because they didn't want to go and live in some boring rock in the sea with nothing to do. But I'm not quite sure who they interviewed, because I don't think the UK is competing with rocks in the sea. Anyway, no disrespect to rocks in the sea, by the way. But the UK isn't it's not the usual suspects that the UK is competing with. It's competing with Italy, it's competing with, Dublin, keeping pretty quiet about it, but Ireland seems to be, it's not making any moves to remove its a very similar remittance base of tax. You've got Greece, you've got, Spain, lots of places that are offering, although they may not necessarily be zero tax havens, whatever you want to call them, they are offering programs for high net worth individuals. And you've obviously got countries that don't levy tax as well, Monaco's, the UAE as well, but it's not the traditional tax haven that the UK has to fear. It's, if somebody moves to Dublin, is it really a great deal of difference in lifestyle from living in London going to Dublin? Is it a great hardship to go and live in Milan or in Tuscany? I might put on about 50 stone from drinking red wine and eating cheese, but I think it's a bold step by the government to scrap.
What do you think the motive is? Political move?
Well, I mean, from a Conservatives' point of view, it's odd, isn't it? Because it is political, but it's not ideological. Because there's no way that a traditional Conservative is going to say, "Oh, let's get rid of the remittance basis," from an ideological point of view. It really, to me, and I'm quite a cynical person, but it's almost like they're just trying to cut the Labour Party off at the knees and take away, probably what would have been their showpiece announcement. Clearly, for the Labour Party, it's an ideological thing, and hence perhaps why they're going to take it on further, make it worse, and remove the IHT benefits that I mentioned previously. But it's a balancing act. It's a real sort of fine line to tread, and I fear that we may well fall off of it.
Yeah, right. And then, I suppose, tying that back to an earlier conversation around the importance of the advice, and you mentioned that sometimes, or the driver needs to be sort of personal circumstances and then the tax piece next to it. So maybe just talk a little bit about that when you're assisting clients, I suppose, navigating that. Is that because I imagine sometimes, especially in this mobile world, clients just come up and go, "I'll go wherever I need to go because I want to minimize my liability, wherever that is and whatever they're doing." Do you then try and walk them back off the ledge a little bit and go, "Look, think about where you want to be, where your family wants to be," and then?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. At the end of the day, if you're moving overseas for tax reasons, you've got to be very careful, because you broadly, in most circumstances, if there's a particular sort of, let's say you're sitting on a gain, you want to crystallise and you want to do it when you're non-resident, and therefore, in most cases, unless it's UK real estate, you'll avoid UK capital gains tax. And you've got to be very careful, because being non-resident for 1 year isn't enough. Effectively, if you don't stay non-resident for more than 5 tax years, then the gain will recrystallize when you come back. Now, it's stating the bleeding obvious, and over 5 years is actually quite a long time. If you don't stay out 5 years, you've got no tax advantage. So that's a key part. Almost there has to be something else in there, kind of inner core that is saying that actually we want to go and have a big adventure overseas, or we want to retire in the sunshine rather than the rain and gloom and cold. There needs to be something else there. And it's just about, I guess, trying to understand that with
presume you're pulling those threads, trying to find that out as part of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, clearly, if it's a 1 million gain, a 10 million gain, or a billion gain, that will drive
the motivation
prepared years to remain outside of the UK. But yeah, there's no set answer. It will very much depend on the individual, where they are, perhaps with family, if they've got lots and lots of family in the UK, particularly whether it's young children or even young grandkids. What is there that's going to bring them into the UK, or alternatively, this end of the spectrum, are they, free and easy with very little keeping them here? It will really depend, the advice on what's the personal situations.
Yeah. So to go back to the kind of entrepreneur side, and 18 months ago you moved out to the Middle East. What's the motive there? Talk about the motive and what your plans are out there and why.
Yeah, for me it was really about just wanting a change in life. I felt like I've been doing the same thing, with slightly different hat on. Over that period, the same thing, and wanted to have a bit of a sort of freshen up. Really, say COVID had taken a bit of a personal sort of toll on me, in the sense that we as a business very very early kind of said, we're not furloughing people, we're not going to make people redundant. Actually, with hindsight, it meant that not only were we carrying our own families, we seemed to be carrying other people's families on our back as well. And it just took quite a lot out of us. And oddly, it was kind of emerging from the other side as things started returning to normal. You start feeling kind of feeling a bit sort of running on empty a little bit. So there's a bit of that. I kind of felt, do I want to carry on doing this anymore, or are there things that I need to do myself? And yeah, the answer to that was yes. I felt I could, achieve those things on my own, really, than in a business. So hence why I left sort of the business behind. But why Dubai? Well, firstly, there's a big yellow thing in the sky. Most of it, other than when it's flooding.
For a while.
Yeah, so that was an attraction. And also, clearly there is a tax benefit there, but I don't think I would have, as we said before, I don't think that was the main drive. I just wanted a bit of an adventure, really, in life, and it's been good. It's it's quite a different lifestyle over there. It's incredibly sort of positive and optimistic. I think with that comes, you need to filter out a lot of the bull that comes along. But work-wise, it's been a real breath of fresh air. It's very much a growing, developing business community there, and a lot of things that even if they're not based in the UAE, a lot of business capital people come through Dubai. It's a bit of a hub. Things. So it's been really good. Really enjoyed it so far.
I'd imagine a lot of entrepreneurs around here, just by the pure fact of its growth and its expansion, that there's a lot of those opportunities, I guess, to advise and help clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very, it's a different stage to the UK, in that it's still in that sort of, still finding its feet is not the right word, but it's still kind of
infancy, really.
Yeah. Still growing, still plenty of time to sort of shift its shape, really.
Yeah. So just to finish off with a couple of bits, and I suppose it maybe ties into that, because you've obviously gone over there, you have to build your network and develop your business there. Obviously, as an observer, you're fairly constant on LinkedIn particularly, but from I guess, tips and ideas for people that networking over your many years, not to talk about age, but many years of doing that, tips and tricks for people.
Networking. I'm probably the least person who'd the least be asking for networking.
Your business of work, so there must be something going on.
I mean, ultimately, my character is introverted, so I would quite happily spend most of my time sat by myself. I think the thing about whether introvert or extrovert is around where you draw your energy from. Being an introvert, you recharge by being by yourself, and if you're an extrovert, you need to be around people. And networking for me has never ever come naturally. I owe probably quite a lot to a chap called Will Kintish. I don't know whether you ever came across him, but certainly in the Northwest, when I first moved to Northwest of Weather East, still does these courses, and I don't know, but you basically a course on how to network, which pretty much starts with how to shake hands, right through to sort of following up with people and things like that. And for me, it's kind of always there's nothing duplicitous and nefarious about this. It's about for me, you have to get into that mood, and it's a bit like flicking a switch. Right, I'm networking. You need to sort of put on a bit of a game face, because it never ever came naturally to me. Small talk doesn't come naturally to me. It's just how I made. Where's my wife? She's Angela. She's extroverted. She enjoys that kind of sort of small talk. With me, it's like less sort of fumbling for what questions are you asking this.
And you still have that now, this many years on?
Yeah, and in some ways, actually, kind of when I'm a little bit less used to it than I was maybe 10, 15 years ago. Because once you've kind of built a business, you've got your own existing network, you become, I think, a bit lazy, and you rely on it. And then when you kind of have to go out and do it again, it's quite a bit rusty at this. So it's so hence why I'm probably not, other than going and asking Will Kintish, I don't really have any great sort of
just going and doing it, I guess. Do you observe others and watch others? Or not particularly?
Not really. I think if I'm speaking to somebody and they maybe offer something, I think that's quite an interesting thing to do or say. But it's an interesting.
And obviously, culturally, things will be done differently as well. So I presume going to the Middle East, spending more time there, a lot of time there, that there's those aspects you need to learn outside of maybe what we might consider traditional networking, being from the Northwest.
Yeah, I think the thing about being in the UAE is that it really is a melting pot. I mean, like most places that you go to, you could stick within the expat community, or if you're going out, I guess, into sort of more general networking events, and you come across people from different cultures. There again, in sort of certain quarters over there, the business card is a bit more of a thing and a centerpiece for a bit of a sort of merry dance of handing over business cards. I found I've had to order some business cards, because I would just say, I haven't had any business cards since before COVID. Doesn't really go down particularly well, so I've had to get a few more. Whereas I think over here, I think the business card probably, for my own sort of thinking and experience, is a bit of an endangered species. I think, and obviously you've got WhatsApp and you scan the QR and all this kind of stuff. But the traditional business card feels that certainly in some areas of the community over there, it's a bit more of it's still a thing. But you mentioned about LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn, I've been on that so long. I did, I still use it on a regular basis. Fundamentally, I enjoy writing, and it's a good, certainly historically has always been a good sort of outlet for posting articles and links through to longer articles you've done on the website. So I've always been quite keen that rather than just having the LinkedIn presence and posting stuff on their site, which they own, is to try and use it
Farm traffic
farm traffic driven website. I think that doesn't work quite so well anymore on LinkedIn. I think they probably, which I think is a shame, to be honest, that they seem to just want everything to stay on their site. Maybe understandable, but it does seem to, if you're posting links and things, it does seem to affect the impressions and engagement that you get. But fundamentally, I enjoy writing, and that's why I post on there. I don't, it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, right. Interesting. So, just a last question, and try not to use the word tax. If you had books to recommend for people to listen to read, all these audio books, that I'm appreciating, you probably want a chapter and verse of Tolly's Tax. But outside of that, if they still print that, I don't know. But what you know, do you do much reading, and what would you recommend people have a read?
Yeah, so I read quite a lot, and I mean, I've got an English degree, so I no doubt my lecturers will be hopefully not dead at all, but will be rolling in their graves if they are. And so I don't really read much fiction at all anymore. I find that my reading time tends to be so condensed that they read something like a Crime and Punishment or something like that, which still have like 10,000 characters in, and they're all in Russian names. It's really, you've only got half an hour to read, you spend all of that time trying to remember who's who in the book and their names and things. So I do just tend to read non-fiction now. So yeah, I've been through. It's hard to pin down, but I particularly like autobiographies. Tends to be by sports people, musicians. So yeah, that tends to be.
Do you read much business books and things like that? Or?
I do, yeah. I'm trying to think of something, a business book that I've
outside of Tolly's Tax.
Right, yeah. So and they do still print Tolly's Tax, by the way. But I've read some standouts over the years. I particularly enjoyed. It was Bad Blood. It was about the Theranos. I've forgotten the and they made it into the film, didn't they? The Dropouts. Okay. I've forgotten the lady's name but I thought that was a terrific book. Something that really got me into crypto back in the day was American Kingpin, which is about Ross Ulbricht, the guy who founded Silk Road, which is a terrific book, and they made that into a fairly lame film, which I have forgotten what I think it was called. Silk Road.
Silk Road, yeah, I think so.
Which is a shame because the book, I think by Richard Bilton is is really good, and really, I guess, got me thinking more and more about Bitcoin around that time, about 2016 or so. But something my wife got me a subscription to something called, I think it's called Willoughby Book Club. And you basically say what you're interested in, what you've liked in the past. And every month they just will send you a random book. So I've got one at the moment called, what is it called? I can't remember what it's called.
Paper, they send you a paper version rather than digital.
Yeah, paper version. But it's about a surfer, Bill Finnegan. And you just think, I would never pick that up off a shelf. But it's great. And last month I got a book called Corruptible, which is just about why we have so many corrupt leaders, and is it a case of that we vote people into power who are corrupt, or is it that corrupt people seek positions of power? And it's very interesting, a very interesting book. Really,
what was their outcome of that?
A bit of both.
Okay,
is the answer. But yeah, really, really interesting, and so yeah, it's kind of. I like those thought-provoking books. I'm not really, other than if I'm feeling sort of, I need a bit of a sort of pep talk internally. I'm not really into necessarily the sort of self-help stuff. And I think I can pick up quite a lot from a biography, some autobiography than
Yeah, there's a lot of that in there anyway, isn't it?
Yeah,
stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I read quite a lot. I'm one of those people who comes back from holiday with. Because I like books, so which obviously if you're going on a holiday, it makes sense to have like a Kindle or other readers are available, I guess. But I just like books, like turning the corners, like underlining stuff. So I end up carrying about 5 or 6 books around with it, which obviously isn't good for your luggage allowance. But I'm not losing the physical books yet.
Yeah, cool. Great. Well, thanks for joining us, Andy. Really insightful chat, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And maybe just to people looking to reach out to you, just obviously there's a broad range of tax you can help with, from obviously personal, corporate, all that side of it, and obviously cryptos in a particular area, but general non-DOMs, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the moment, I practice as because I'm a barrister as well. I've got practicing certificate, so at the moment, I do my work off of my practicing certificate, and I've got direct access, which means that you have to, and it is a special sort of course you have to do as a barrister to make sure that you are capable of dealing with the general public, which I think is quite interesting. But I do take sort of direct access as well. So if there's anything that anybody wants any assistance with, just send me an email.
Yeah. Okay, great. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Andy.
Great. So thanks, Martin.
Cheers. Thanks for listening, everyone.